Some stories don't begin at the beginning. They begin at the moment everything changed, and then they ask you to walk backward through time to understand how two strangers became family. This is a story about paying attention, about what happens when one person decides not to look away. In a world that moves too fast, where folks pass each other on the street without a second glance. There are still quiet heroes among us. They don't wear capes. They don't make headlines. They simply notice when someone is hurting, and they choose to act. Dorothy Brennan is 68 years old. She runs a barber shop in a small Ohio town, and 6 months ago, a young man sat down in her chair, and she saw something hidden beneath his hair that would change both their lives forever. But we're not starting there. We're starting with the roses. The scissors stopped mid-cut. Dorothy Brennan stood frozen behind Earl Jessup's chair, her hand suspended in the air, morning light streaming through the window of her shop on Main Street. Earl was talking about his granddaughter's graduation, something about a scholarship, but his words had faded into white noise. The bell above the door was still ringing. A young man stood in the doorway, clean clothes, straight posture, clear eyes. In his hands, a bouquet of yellow roses, the exact shade she used to grow in her garden when Frank was alive. Earl turned to look. "Well, I'll be." Nathan Cole stepped forward. His boots made soft sounds on the worn wooden floor, the same floor Dorothy had swept every morning for 16 years. He moved differently now. Not the hunched, trembling figure she remembered. This man walked like someone who had solid ground beneath his feet. "Mrs. Brennan." Dorothy set down her scissors. Her fingers were shaking. She untied her apron, draped it over the back of the empty chair, and stepped around Earl. They met in the middle of the shop. She opened her arms. He walked into them. The embrace was solid, steady. She could feel the muscles in his back, the strength that hadn't been there before. Her palm pressed against the spot where she'd first discovered the wounds healed now, nothing but faint scars beneath his shirt. "You saved my life," he whispered. Dorothy couldn't speak. Her throat had closed around something she couldn't name. Earl Jessup reached for the box of tissues on the counter. He'd heard Dorothy talk about this young man for months, every Thursday. She'd close the shop 10 minutes early to take his call. Every week, she'd share some small piece of news. He finished his certification. He got an apartment. He testified in court. Earl had watched her worry and hope and pray. Now he understood why. Nathan pulled back, holding the roses out to her. Yellow petals trembled in the light. "Got a job," he said. "Got an apartment. Got a life." "I know." Her voice came out rough. "You tell me every Thursday." "Yes, ma'am. But you haven't seen it." He gestured to himself, to the shop, to everything around them. "Now it's real. Because of you." Dorothy looked at the flowers. Frank used to bring her yellow roses on their anniversary. She hadn't received any since he passed, 9 years ago. "I just cut hair," she managed. Nathan shook his head slowly. "No, ma'am. You saw me." 3 words. Just 3 words. But they carried the weight of everything: the wounds she'd discovered, the calls she'd made, the network she'd mobilized, the months of recovery and setbacks and small victories. Earl dabbed at his eyes with a tissue. "Now you got me going too." Dorothy took the roses. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling. But to understand why those 3 words mattered so much, why a bouquet of yellow roses and a young man in clean clothes could reduce a 68-year-old woman to tears in her own barbershop, you need to go back 6 months. To the day a stranger sat down in her chair, to the moment she lifted his tangled hair and saw what was hidden beneath, to the choice she made not to look away. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness becomes someone's lifeline. If this story touched you, we'd love to hear where you're watching from today, as they say. A friend is someone who sees through you and still enjoys the view. 6 months earlier. The key turned in the lock at 6:30, same as every morning for 16 years. Dorothy pushed open the door, and the familiar smell hit her barbicide. Coffee grounds. The faint sweetness of the pomade she'd ordered from the same supplier since 1998. She flipped the light switch. Fluorescent tubes flickered, hummed, caught. The broom was where she'd left it, propped against the third chair. She started sweeping, bristles scratching across worn linoleum, pushing hair clippings from yesterday toward the corner. Gray strands, brown, a few black ones from Mrs. Patterson's daughter who'd come in for a trim before her job interview. On the wall, Frank smiled from a photograph taken 30 years ago, his army dress uniform, the flag behind him. She didn't look at it directly anymore, just caught it in her peripheral vision. A presence rather than an image. Next to Frank, her Army Nurse Corps certificate. 18 years of service, 3 deployments. Wounds she'd stitched in field hospitals that smelled of dust and copper and fear. Below that, tucked in the corner of a frame, a small photograph of a young soldier. Danny Miller. 23 years old forever. Dorothy turned away. Started the coffee maker. Earl Jessup arrived at 7 sharp, the bell announcing him like it had every Tuesday and Thursday for 12 years. Dot, you hear about the Henderson boy? Got himself into some trouble over in Columbus. What kind of trouble? The kind that involves lawyers. She draped the cape around his shoulders. His mama must be worried sick. She's at church every morning now, praying. Dorothy ran the comb through Earl's thinning hair. The rhythm of it comb, snip, comb. Snip had become as automatic as breathing. You doing all right? Earl asked, watching her in the mirror. Same as always. But that wasn't quite true. Something had felt off for weeks now, a restlessness she couldn't name, like waiting for a phone to ring without knowing who might call. At 5 o'clock, she locked the front door and reached for her purse. That's when she noticed it. A Honda Civic, parked across the street. Old model. Rust around the wheel wells. Someone was inside. She could see the shape of a head against the driver's seat. Tilted back. Sleeping. Cedar Falls wasn't the kind of town where people slept in their cars. Dorothy stood at the window, keys in hand, watching. The figure didn't move. The car was still there the next morning. And the morning after that. Dorothy mentioned it to Earl on Thursday. He glanced out the window, shrugged. Probably visiting family. She wasn't convinced. On the 4th day, the car was gone. Dorothy told herself it didn't matter. Whoever it was had moved on. Not her concern. But on the 7th day, it came back. Same spot. Same rusted Honda. Same figure slumped behind the wheel. The bell above her door rang at 11:47 on a Tuesday morning. The shop was empty, the lull between the early crowd and the lunch break walk-ins. Dorothy looked up from reorganizing her station. A young man stood in the doorway, mid-20s, tall, but too thin, his collarbones visible beneath a worn army jacket that hung loose on his frame. His hair was long and matted, unwashed, falling past his ears in tangled clumps. Dark circles carved half-moons beneath his eyes. His cheekbones jutted sharp against sallow skin. "Do you?" His voice cracked. He swallowed. Tried again. "Do you take walk-ins?" The sound of it hoarse, barely used, made Dorothy's chest tighten. She set down the comb in her hand. "Sit on down, honey. I've got time." He hesitated at the threshold. His eyes flicked to the window, to the door, back to the window. Dorothy had seen that look before, in field hospitals, in veterans' waiting rooms. The constant scanning, the inability to settle. He was running from something. He crossed the floor in careful steps, like the ground might give way beneath him. When he lowered himself into the chair, his shoulders stayed hunched, his hands gripping the armrests. Dorothy fastened the cape around his neck, keeping her movements slow, gentle, the way she used to approach wounded soldiers who'd forgotten how to trust. "How short you want it." His reflection stared back at him from the mirror, hollow, haunted. "Just make it normal," he said. "Make me look normal." The word landed heavy in the quiet shop. Dorothy picked up her comb, started working through the tangles at the back of his head, her fingers moving with practiced care through the knots. That's when she felt it. A ridge beneath the hair, then another. She lifted a section of matted strands and her hand went still. Bruises, purple fading to yellow, fading to green. Different stages of healing layered on top of each other. Someone had hit him here, more than once. Over time, she lifted another section. 3 cuts ran parallel across the back of his skull, scabbed over but recent. Too straight to be accidental, too deliberate. Her stomach dropped. 18 years in army hospitals. She'd seen wounds like this before. Defensive wounds. The kind you get when you're trying to protect your head from someone coming at you from behind. She kept her hand steady, didn't let her breathing change. In the mirror. His eyes were closed, his jaw tight. "Son?" Her voice came out calm, measured. "Who did this to you?" His whole body went rigid beneath the cape. "It's nothing." The words came fast. "I fell." "Sweetheart, I was an army nurse for 18 years. These aren't from falling." Silence stretched between them. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Outside, a car passed on Main Street. His hands gripped the armrests tighter, knuckles white. "Please." His voice dropped to something barely audible. "Just cut my hair. That's all I came for." Dorothy looked at him in the mirror, at the dark circles and the hollow cheeks and the fear written in every line of his body. He was coiled like a spring, ready to bolt at the first wrong word. She could push, call the police right now, force the issue. But she'd seen that backfire too many times, in hospitals, in counseling rooms. You push too hard. They run, and then you never see them again. She needed him to trust her first. "All right." She picked up her scissors. "Let's get you looking sharp." She began cutting, keeping her movement slow and even, but her mind was racing. Those wounds weren't from a single incident. They were layered, repeated. Someone had been hurting this boy for weeks, and from the way he kept glancing at the window, she had a feeling they weren't finished with him yet. Dorothy cut slowly. The scissors made soft metallic sounds in the quiet shop. "Weather's supposed to turn this week," she said. "Earl thinks we might get frost by Friday." Nathan didn't respond. His shoulders were still up around his ears. "High school football team made it to regionals. First time in 12 years. Whole town's been talking about it." She kept her voice light, conversational, the same tone she'd used with soldiers fresh off the medevac. Too shocked to speak, but needing the sound of something normal. Snip, snip, snip. His shoulders dropped half an inch. "Gas prices are up again. Makes you wonder." His breathing slowed. She worked through another section of tangled hair, careful around the wounds. In the mirror, she watched him watching her, testing, waiting to see if she'd push again. She didn't. "That's an army jacket," she said, keeping her eyes on her work. "You serve?" A pause. His jaw worked. "Yes, ma'am. 3 years. Got back 8 months ago." "Thank you for your service." She meant it. "My late husband was Army. I was Nurse Corps." His eyes met hers in the mirror for the first time. His grip on the armrests loosened. Just slightly. "Coming home hard?" she asked. Silence. Then, "Hardest thing I ever did. Harder than being over there." Dorothy nodded. Frank used to say the same thing. So did half the men who came through her shop after their deployments. The war you could understand. The war had rules. Coming home to a world that had moved on without you, that was the thing that broke people. "Sometimes the war follows you back," she said. His hands unclenched on the armrests. Dorothy set down her scissors, moved to the empty chair beside him and sat. "Tell me." He stared at his reflection, the half-finished haircut, the gaunt face. "My brother." His voice came out flat. "Tyler. He died 6 months ago. Car accident." "I'm sorry. He left debts, gambling. I didn't know how bad until they came for me." Dorothy's chest tightened. "Who came?" "The people he owed. $47,000. He swallowed hard. "They don't go through courts. They don't do payment plans. Loan sharks. They found me 3 weeks after the funeral. Said I had to pay what Tyler owed, or pay with something else." His hand moved to the back of his head without thinking, touched the spot where the wounds were hidden. First time. They just talked, explained the situation. His voice was steady now, detached the way trauma survivors sometimes spoke, like they were describing something that happened to someone else. Second time. They made it clear what would happen if I couldn't pay. The wounds. Third time was 2 weeks ago. They said I have until Friday. That's 3 days from now. Or what? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Dorothy's mind was calculating. Friday, 3 days. These weren't people who made empty threats. The layered bruises proved that. "I've been living in my car for 3 months," he continued. "Lost my apartment. Couldn't work. Can't think straight. Can't sleep. My Army savings ran out 2 months ago. Been selling whatever I could just to eat. Every time I try to get on my feet, they find me. Take whatever I've managed to scrape together. Why here? Why my shop?" His jaw trembled. The detachment cracked. "I saw your place. Every day from the car. People coming out looking." He struggled for the word. Different. Like someone gave a damn about them. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, rough, almost angry. "I wanted to feel that. Just once. Before." He stopped. "Before what?" He shook his head. Wouldn't say it. Dorothy stood, moved behind him again, placed both hands on his shoulders. Firm and steady through the cape. "Friday is 3 days away. That's 3 days we have to fix this. There's no fixing. Look at me." She turned him to face her directly, her hands still on his shoulders. "I spent 18 years keeping soldiers alive. You think I'm going to let some loan shark take one of mine?" He stared at her. His chin quivered. "These people?" His voice dropped. "They'll find out. They'll come for you too." Dorothy thought of Frank, of Danny Miller, Of all the young men she'd watched slip through her fingers because she hadn't pushed hard enough, acted fast enough, not this time. Son, I've faced worse than them. Let them come. His grip on the armrest loosened. His shoulders dropped another inch. You don't even know my name, he whispered. Then tell me. Nathan. Nathan Cole. Dorothy squeezed his shoulders. All right, Nathan Cole. We've got work to do. She reached for the phone on the counter. Who are you calling? A friend. Someone who can help. She dialed a number she hadn't used in months. It rang twice. Ray, it's Dorothy Brennan. I need a favor. She paused. And I need it now. Dorothy hung up the phone and turned to Nathan. Ray Holloway. He's a detective with Cedar Falls PD. Army veteran, served with my husband in the Gulf. He'll be here within the hour. Nathan's face went white. Police, no. I can't. You can. And you will. They'll find out. These people have connections. They'll know I talked. Nathan. Dorothy's voice was firm. You have two choices. You can keep running until Friday, and then whatever happens, happens. Or you can let me help you fight back. His hands were shaking again. The tremor ran up his arms, into his shoulders. Come on. She took his elbow. Let's get you something to eat while we wait. She led him through the doorway into the small room behind the shop. A worn sofa against one wall, a mini fridge humming in the corner, a hot plate on the counter. The space where she took her breaks, ate her lunch, sometimes sat alone after closing and listened to the silence. Nathan lowered himself onto the sofa like his legs had given out. The cape was still around his shoulders. She'd forgotten to remove it. When's the last time you ate? Really ate? He stared at the floor. I don't remember. Dorothy opened the fridge. Leftover soup from yesterday, half a loaf of bread. She heated the soup on the hot plate, the smell of chicken and vegetables filling the small space. Made a sandwich with what she had: ham, cheese, mustard. She set the food on the coffee table in front of him. He picked up the sandwich, took a bite, then another. Then he was eating like he'd forgotten food existed. Crumbs falling onto the cape, soup dripping down his chin. He didn't seem to notice. Dorothy sat in the chair across from him, waited, between bites. He started talking. The words came out in fragments at first, then faster. Tyler was supposed to be the strong one. He took care of me when Mom left. When Dad drank himself to death, he was all I had. Dorothy nodded, said nothing. Then I enlisted. I was supposed to come back and help him, get us both on our feet. His voice cracked. I came back too late. He was already gone. The soup bowl was empty now. He stared into it. If I'd been here, if I'd come home sooner, if I'd known about the gambling. You couldn't have known. I should have. He was my brother. He set down the bowl. His hands were steadier now, but his face had gone slack, exhausted. Sometimes I think. He stopped, swallowed. It would be easier if I just... The sentence hung unfinished in the air. Dorothy leaned forward, took his hands in hers. They were cold, rough. The knuckles scabbed. I know that thought, she said quietly. I had it too. When Frank died. He looked up, surprised. 9 years ago, heart attack, no warning. Her throat tightened, but she kept going. After the funeral, I wanted to close the shop, sell everything, disappear. What stopped you? Earl Jessup. He showed up the day after we buried Frank, sat down in my chair and said, Dot, I need a haircut. Nathan frowned. That's it. That's it. But what he really meant was, I need you to be here. I need this place to exist. I need you. She squeezed his hands. You walked into my shop today. Nathan Cole. You think that was random? I don't know what I think anymore. I do. Somewhere inside you. Some part of you knew you needed help, and you found someone who could give it. A knock at the back door made them both jump. Dorothy rose, unfastening the cape from Nathan's shoulders and draping it over the sofa arm. That'll be Ray. She opened the door to a man in his late 50s, gray at the temples, wearing a Cedar Falls PD jacket. Ray Holloway had the same weathered look Frank used to have, the look of someone who'd seen too much and kept going anyway. Dorothy. He nodded at her, then looked past her shoulder to Nathan on the sofa. This the young man you called about? Nathan Cole, Army veteran, 3 years, just got back 8 months ago. Ray's expression shifted. Recognition. Kinship. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him, pulled a small recorder from his pocket. All right, son, tell me everything. From the beginning. Nathan looked at Dorothy. She nodded. He started talking. Names. Descriptions. The bar in Columbus where they'd first approached him. The parking lot where they'd cornered him the second time. The amount they claimed he owed. The deadline. Ray took notes. Asked questions. His face remained neutral, but Dorothy saw his jaw tighten when Nathan described the third encounter, the one that left the cuts on his scalp. When Nathan finished, Ray clicked off the recorder. These men, he said slowly, they operate out of Columbus. We've had our eye on them for months. Nathan's head snapped up. They've hurt other people, other veterans. Actually, you're not the first. Nathan's face changed. Not the first. That meant pattern. That meant evidence. That meant he wasn't alone. Here's what's going to happen, Ray continued. I'm going to get you somewhere safe tonight. We've been building this case for a while now. Your testimony might be the piece we need to finally move on them. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling Patricia Simmons at the VA. She handles cases like yours, veterans falling through the cracks. She'll want to meet you first thing tomorrow morning. Dorothy watched Nathan's face, the confusion, the disbelief. Why? He whispered. Why would you do this for me? Ray looked at him, really looked at him. Because I was you once, son, 30 years ago, and somebody helped me when I couldn't help myself. He paused. Now it's my turn. That night, Ray drove Nathan to a safe house in the next county, a small ranch on a quiet street, maintained by the county for witnesses in protective custody. Dorothy watched them pull away from her shop, Nathan's face pale in the passenger window. She couldn't sleep. Sat in her living room with the lights off, watching the street through the curtains. At 2 a.m., a patrol car rolled past Ray's people, keeping watch. At 3 a.m., her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Nathan. Made it safe. Thank you. She typed back. Get some rest. Tomorrow we work. The next morning. Dorothy opened her shop at the usual time. Earl arrived at 7, took one look at her face, and didn't ask questions. He just sat in the chair and let her cut his hair in silence. At 9 o'clock, her phone rang. Ray. Patty Simmons is with Nathan now. She's got him started on paperwork for emergency housing, job training, the works, and Dorothy. He paused. She thinks we can prove the debt isn't legally transferable. Tyler's obligations died with Tyler. Dorothy gripped the phone tighter. You mean he doesn't owe them anything? Not a dime. These people count on folks not knowing their rights. She closed her eyes, breathed. What happens now? Now we build the case. Nathan's testimony fills in gaps we've had for months. It's going to take time, weeks. Maybe longer, but we're going to get these people. After she hung up, Dorothy stood at the window for a long moment, looking at the empty spot where Nathan's car used to be parked. The first week passed slowly. Dorothy kept the shop running, cut hair, listened to Earl's stories about his grandchildren. But every day at noon, she checked her phone, waiting. On Thursday at 6 p.m., she closed the shop 10 minutes early and sat by the register. The phone rang at 6:02. "Mrs. Brennan?" Nathan's voice was thin, tired. "I wasn't sure you'd answer." "I told you Thursday at 6. I meant it." Silence on the line. Then, "I can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see them." "Where are you now?" "Still at the safe house. Patty's people check on me twice a day. It's quiet here." A pause. Too quiet. Dorothy told him about Earl's granddaughter and her softball game, about the Henderson boy whose legal trouble turned out to be a misunderstanding, about the weather turning cold and the leaves starting to change. Small things, normal things. By the end of the call, his breathing had slowed. "Same time next week?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." She hung up and sat in the quiet shop, the last of the daylight fading through the windows. 3 weeks later, Ray called with news. "We made arrests this morning. 4 men, all connected to the operation that was threatening Nathan." His voice carried a weight of satisfaction. "Multiple victims came forward once word got out. Veterans, mostly. People who'd been too scared to talk." And Dorothy's hand trembled against the phone. "And Nathan, he'll need to testify eventually, but for now, he's safe. The immediate threat is neutralized." That Thursday, Nathan's call came at 6:01. "I heard about the arrests," he said. His voice sounded different, lighter somehow. "Ray told me this morning. How do you feel?" A long pause. "I don't know. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like maybe it's not real." "It's real. Patty got me into a job training program. Welding certification. Starts next week." He laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. "I've never welded anything in my life." "You'll learn, Mrs. Brennan." His voice grew serious. "I still don't understand why you did all this. You didn't know me. You could have just cut my hair and sent me on my way." Dorothy looked at the wall where Frank's photograph hung. Next to it, Danny Miller's young face smiled from that old frame. 40 years ago, she said slowly, I didn't push hard enough with someone who needed help, and I lost him." She paused. "I wasn't going to make that mistake again." Silence on the line. "I'm sorry," Nathan said quietly. "Don't be sorry. Just keep showing up. Every Thursday. That's all I ask." "Yes, ma'am." She hung up and turned off the lights in the shop, walked to the wall and straightened Danny's photograph. "This one's going to make it," she whispered. "I promise." The weeks turned into months. The Thursday calls continued, some good, some harder. Nathan started his welding program, moved into transitional housing, began seeing a counselor through the VA. But healing wasn't a straight line. Dorothy knew that better than anyone, and the call she received on a Tuesday morning in late January proved it. It was Patty Simmons. Her voice was careful, measured. "Dorothy, I need you to come. Nathan's in trouble." Dorothy was in her car within 20 minutes. 2 hours of highway stretched ahead, the morning sun low and blinding through the windshield. She stopped once for coffee at a gas station outside of Marion, her hands wrapped tight around the paper cup as she stood in the parking lot and watched trucks roll past. Patty met her at the door of Nathan's apartment, a small unit in a transitional housing complex on the east side of Columbus. "He missed his last 3 days at the welding program," Patty said quietly. "Wouldn't answer his phone. I came to check on him this morning and found him like this." The smell hit Dorothy first when she stepped inside. Unwashed sheets, stale air, the sour tang of someone who'd stopped caring about themselves. Fast food containers piled on the kitchen counter, most of them untouched. The food inside dried and hardening. The blinds were drawn. The only light came from a television playing with the sound off flickering images casting shadows across the walls. Nathan was curled on the bed in the back room, facing the wall. Same clothes he'd been wearing the last time she'd seen him, weeks ago. His hair had grown out again, matted against the pillow, greasy and tangled. Dorothy sat on the edge of the mattress, said nothing. "I thought I was getting better." His voice was muffled against the pillow. "I really thought I was. And then yesterday I woke up and I couldn't move. Couldn't make myself care about anything. That happens. The welding program called. I missed 3 days. They're going to drop me." He pulled his knees tighter to his chest. "All that work, all that help you and Patty gave me, and I threw it away because I couldn't get out of bed. We'll figure it out. What's the point?" He turned slightly, and Dorothy saw his face hollow again. The dark circles returned, a patchy beard covering his jaw. His eyes were red-rimmed, bloodshot. "Even if they go to prison, I'm still this. Still broken. Still the guy who couldn't handle his own problems." His voice cracked. "I testified at the preliminary hearing last week. Did Ray tell you?" "He mentioned it. I saw them. In the courtroom. They were right there, 15 feet away from me. And one of them, the one who held me down the third time, he just smiled at me. The whole time I was talking, describing what they did. He just sat there and smiled." Nathan's hands clenched against the sheets. "I threw up in the bathroom before I went in. My hands were shaking so bad I had to hold onto the witness stand just to stay upright. Everyone was looking at me. The judge, the lawyers, the people in the gallery." His voice dropped. "I could see what they were thinking. Look at this pathetic kid. Can't even keep it together long enough to answer questions." "Nathan, I'm a coward." The word came out harsh, bitter. A grown man who got beaten up and couldn't fight back, couldn't protect himself, had to have a 68-year-old woman and her friends save him because he was too weak to save himself. He rolled onto his back, staring at the ceiling. His jaw was tight, his eyes wet. 3 years in the army. 3 years. I was supposed to be strong. I was supposed to be able to handle things. He laughed a short, ugly sound. And instead I ended up living in my car, begging for scraps, letting strangers beat me up for money my dead brother owed. What kind of man does that make me? Dorothy looked at him for a long moment, at the shame written across his face, at the self-hatred pulling his features tight. The kind who survived, she said quietly. He didn't respond. You want to know what I see when I look at you? I see a young man who lost his brother, got ambushed by predators, and still had enough fight left in him to walk into my shop and ask for help. She paused. That's not weakness. That's the hardest thing there is. It doesn't feel like that. It never does. Not when you're in it. She reached out and touched his shoulder. He flinched but didn't pull away. Some days you run, some days you walk, some days you just breathe. Her hand stayed steady. But you keep going. That's all any of us can do. Silence. The television flickered in the other room. Outside, a car door slammed. "I'm so tired," Nathan whispered. "I know, baby. I know." Dorothy stayed 3 hours, made him eat a sandwich, had to sit there and watch him chew every bite, sat outside the bathroom door while he showered, listening to make sure he was still moving, called the welding program herself, explained the situation, asked for a second chance. They gave him one. When she finally left, Nathan was sitting on the edge of his bed, hair still damp, wearing clean clothes she'd found in his closet. His eyes were clearer, not good, but clearer. "Thursday?" she asked from the doorway. "Thursday." 3 months later, Dorothy sat in the gallery of the Columbus County Courthouse. Nathan was on the witness stand, wearing a borrowed suit that was slightly too big in the shoulders. His hands gripped the edge of the stand, knuckles white, but he didn't break. He told his story, answered every question, looked at the defendants only once, and didn't flinch. Guilty on all counts. Nathan walked out of the courthouse into April sunshine. Dorothy was waiting on the steps. "It's over?" he asked. "That part is—" She took his arm. "Now comes the rest." He nodded slowly, looked up at the sky, clear, blue, endless. "Mrs. Brennan, there's something I need to tell you. About why I really came into your shop that day. What I was planning to do before you stopped me." They found a bench outside the courthouse. The April air carried the smell of cut grass and car exhaust from the street below. People walked past, lawyers in suits, families, clerks on lunch breaks, but Dorothy barely noticed them. Nathan stared at his hands. They were calloused now from the welding work, stronger than they'd been 6 months ago. "I didn't just wander into your shop that day," he said. "I chose it, on purpose." Dorothy waited. "That morning, I woke up in my car and I'd made a decision." His voice was steady, matter of fact. "I was done. Done running. Done hiding. Done being afraid. I was going to let Friday come, let them do whatever they were going to do. I didn't care anymore." His jaw tightened. "But then I looked across the street and saw your shop, saw you through the window, sweeping the floor, and I thought—" He stopped, swallowed. "I thought, if I'm going to die, I want to look like a person first, not whatever I'd become. I wanted someone to make me look human again, one last time. That's all I wanted." Dorothy's chest ached. "I wasn't looking for help. I'd given up on that." He turned to face her. "But then you lifted my hair and you saw the wounds. And you didn't flinch. You didn't call the cops right away or kick me out or pretend you hadn't noticed." His voice cracked. "You just asked who did it, like you actually wanted to know. Like I mattered." A woman walked past with a stroller. Pigeons scattered near the courthouse steps. "That's when something changed. I can't explain it. You saw the worst thing about me, the proof that I was weak, that I couldn't protect myself, and you didn't look away." He wiped his face with the back of his hand. "Why?" His eyes searched hers. "I've been trying to figure it out for 6 months. You didn't know me. You could have just finished the haircut and let me walk out. Why didn't you?" Dorothy looked across the parking lot. A mother was loading groceries into her car. A child chased a pigeon across the pavement. Normal life, continuing on, indifferent to the weight of the conversation on this bench. 40 years ago, she said slowly, I was stationed at an army hospital in Germany, young nurse, 28 years old, thought I knew everything." Nathan was quiet. "There was a soldier, Private First Class Danny Miller, 23.
He'd been through something bad, wouldn't talk about it, but you could see it in his eyes. She paused. That same look you had when you walked into my shop. The words came harder now. I noticed. I saw the signs. The way he flinched at loud noises, the way he'd disappear for hours, the marks on his arms he tried to hide under his sleeves. Her hands clenched in her lap. But I didn't push. I told myself he'd ask for help when he was ready, that it wasn't my place to interfere.
I was being respectful. That's what I told myself. What happened? 3 days later, they found him in the supply room. Dorothy's voice dropped. He'd used his service weapon? Nathan exhaled sharply. I've carried Danny Miller with me for 40 years, every single day. I wonder what if I'd said something? What if I'd sat down with him and asked how he was really doing? What if I'd pushed harder? She turned to look at Nathan directly. When you sat in my chair and I saw those wounds, I saw Danny all over again. Another young soldier falling apart. Another chance to do something. Her voice hardened. I wasn't going to make the same mistake twice. Nathan was silent for a long moment. A siren wailed somewhere in the distance, fading. Mrs. Brennan. His voice was soft. You didn't fail, Danny. I didn't save him either. You were 28. You didn't have the training, the experience. He leaned forward. And his death, that wasn't your fault. It was the fault of a system that sends people to war and then forgets about them. It was the fault of everyone who should have been watching and wasn't. Dorothy shook her head. I was there. I saw. You saw. That's exactly the point. Nathan's voice gained strength. You saw then, and you didn't know what to do. So you spent the next 40 years learning, watching, paying attention, getting better. He paused. And when I walked through your door, you finally knew what to do. You had the tools, the experience, the wisdom. He reached out, took her hand. Danny Miller's death taught you how to save me. Do you understand that everything you learned from losing him, that's why I'm alive right now? Dorothy stared at him. In 40 years, no one had ever said this to her. In 40 years of guilt and replaying that supply room door, no one had ever framed it this way. Something shifted in her chest. A knot she'd carried so long she'd forgotten it was there. You saved each other, Nathan said quietly. You and Danny, just 40 years apart. Tears ran down Dorothy's cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. They sat in silence. The spring breeze rustled the trees lining the courthouse lawn. A bird sang somewhere in the branches above them. You want to know the real secret? Dorothy said finally. Her voice was rough. The thing it took me 68 years to figure out. Tell me. Most of loving someone is just noticing them. That's all. Noticing when they're hurting. Asking how they're doing. Not looking away when looking away would be easier. She squeezed his hand. That's what love is. Everything else is just window dressing. Nathan nodded slowly. You noticed me. And you let me. That's the other half. You let someone see you when you were at your worst. She looked at him. That takes courage, too. He sat with that for a moment. The courthouse cast long shadows across the parking lot. There's a kid at the welding program, he said. Just started last month. Ex-military. Same hollow look. Eats lunch alone. Flinches when people get too close. Dorothy's heart lifted. And I've been sitting with him. Couple times a week. Haven't said much yet. Just being there. He paused. Yesterday he told me about his sister. She's in trouble.
Same kind of people who came after me. What did you do? Gave him Patty's number? Told him there was help if he wanted it? Nathan met her eyes. He called her this morning. Dorothy smiled. The first real smile she'd worn in weeks. That's exactly right, she whispered. They stood. The afternoon was stretching toward evening, the light turning golden on the courthouse stone. Thursday, Nathan asked. Wouldn't miss it. He hugged her, not the desperate grip of a drowning man, but the steady embrace of someone standing on solid ground. As Dorothy drove home, her phone buzzed. A text from Ray Holloway. Need to see you tomorrow. The lawyer finally got word on Tyler's dead. It's been declared unenforceable. Nathan's free and clear. But there's something else. Something about his mother. Dorothy met Ray at the police station the next morning. He led her to his office, closed the door, and handed her a folder. Nathan's mother, he said. She's in a care facility in Indiana. Early onset dementia. Tyler had been covering her expenses for years. That's why he got into gambling in the first place. He was trying to pay her medical bills. Dorothy looked at the documents. Financial records, care facility invoices. A photograph of a woman in her early 60s, gray-haired, vacant-eyed. Nathan didn't know, not until after Tyler died. He found the paperwork in his brother's apartment. Ray leaned back in his chair. He's been visiting her every Sunday since he got stable, paying what he can toward her care. Dorothy set down the folder. He never told me. He doesn't tell many people, but I thought you should know the whole picture, the kind of man he really is. She drove home with that knowledge sitting heavy in her chest. Nathan had been carrying even more than she'd realized, and he'd never asked for help with any of it. Just quietly started paying those bills, one at a time, the way someone rebuilds a wall brick by brick. 2 months later. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Dorothy's shop. She was cutting Earl's hair when the bell above the door rang. Her scissors stopped. Nathan stood in the doorway. Yellow roses in his hands, clean clothes, clear eyes. The same young man from 6 months ago, but everything had changed. Well, I'll be, Earl said. Nathan crossed the floor. Dorothy set down her tools. They met in the middle of the shop. She opened her arms. He walked into them. The embrace was solid, steady. She could feel the strength in him now, muscle built from months of honest work. Her hand pressed against his back, the same spot where she'd first found the wounds. Nothing but faint scars now. You saved my life, he whispered. I just cut hair. No, ma'am. You saw me? Earl reached for the tissues. Nathan pulled back, offered the roses. Yellow petals caught the morning light. Got a job. Got an apartment. He paused. Got a life. I know. You tell me every Thursday. But you haven't seen it. He gestured at himself, at the shop, at the April sunshine pouring through the windows. Now it's real. Dorothy took the flowers. Her hands trembled, but her smile was steady. Sit down, she said. You need a trim. He sat in the same chair he'd sat in 6 months ago. Dorothy picked up her scissors. Same as before. Make you look normal. Nathan laughed. A real laugh. Deep and unguarded, the first she'd ever heard from him. I think I finally am normal. Honey, nobody who sits in my chair is normal. That's why they come here. She began cutting. The rhythm came back immediately, comb, snip, comb, snip. But this time there were no wounds to discover, just healthy scalp and hair that had been properly cared for. Earl didn't leave when his cut was finished. He sat in the waiting chair, watching.
16 years I've been coming to this shop, he said. Seen a lot of folks pass through, but this one, he nodded at Nathan. This one's something special. Wasn't me, Nathan said. It was her. Dorothy caught his eye in the mirror. It was both of us. After Earl left, Dorothy hung the closed sign on the door. She and Nathan sat in the quiet shop, afternoon light stretching across the worn floor. That kid I told you about, Nathan said. Marcus, from the welding program. The one with the sister in trouble. Patty got her into a shelter last week. Safe now. He paused. Marcus came to work yesterday with his head up for the first time since I met him. Looked me in the eye and said thank you. How'd that feel? Strange. He thought about it. Good, strange. Like something came full circle. Dorothy stood and walked to the wall where she kept her photographs. Frank in his uniform. Danny Miller's young face. She reached into her bag and pulled out a new frame, Nathan's army photo, which she'd had printed from a copy he'd sent her weeks ago. She hung it next to the others. You sure about that? Nathan asked. You're family now. Family goes on the wall. He joined her, looking at the photographs. 3 soldiers, 3 different stories, all connected now. Tell me about him, Nathan said, nodding toward Danny's picture. What was he like? Young, eager, scared underneath it all. He had this laugh, you could hear it across the whole ward. She paused. He reminded me of my nephew. Is that why it hit so hard when you lost him? Part of it. The other part was knowing I could have done something. She touched the edge of Danny's frame. But you were right. What you said at the courthouse. Maybe losing him taught me how to save you. Maybe that was the point all along. Nathan was quiet for a moment. Mrs. Brennan. That thing you said about noticing people, about that being what love really is. He turned to face her. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I think you're right. But there's another part too. What's that? Letting yourself be noticed. He paused. I spent so long trying to be invisible, trying not to be a burden, and all it did was make everything worse. He looked at Danny's photograph. Maybe if he'd let someone see him, really see him, things would have been different. Dorothy nodded slowly. Maybe so. I'm going to keep sitting with Marcus, keep paying attention, and if I see someone else falling through the cracks. He straightened. I'm not going to look away. That's all any of us can do. He hugged her one more time. Then he walked to the door and held it open for her. Thursday. Wouldn't miss it. They stepped out into the April evening. Cedar Falls was quiet, peaceful. The kind of ordinary that held extraordinary things if you knew where to look. Dorothy locked the shop behind her, turned to walk home. Mrs. Brennan. She looked back. Nathan was standing in the fading light, hands in his pockets, looking more at peace than she'd ever seen him. Thank you for seeing me. She nodded. No more words were needed. She walked home through streets she'd known for decades, past houses where she'd cut 3 generations of hair, under trees that had been saplings when she first opened her shop. The roses sat in a vase on her kitchen table that night, yellow petals glowing in the lamplight. Same color Frank used to bring her. She touched them gently. Some people come into our lives to teach us. Some come to be taught. And some, the rare ones, come to remind us that the smallest act of kindness can change everything. Dorothy turned off the kitchen light and went to bed. For the first time in 40 years, she didn't dream about Danny Miller. Some stories leave a quiet weight in the chest. Not sadness exactly, something more tender than that. A recognition, perhaps, of how close we all walk to the edge sometimes. How much depends on whether someone chooses to look. Many of us have known what it feels like to be unseen, to carry something heavy and wonder if anyone notices. Some of us have been the one who needed help but couldn't find the words to ask. Others have been the one who saw someone struggling and didn't know what to say or said nothing at all, and carried that silence for years afterward. Dorothy almost let Nathan walk out of her shop that day. Nathan almost gave up before he ever walked in. The distance between those two outcomes was nothing more than a choice to pay attention. It's all right if this story sits with you for a while. It doesn't need to resolve into anything neat. Some things are meant to be felt, not understood. Whatever you might be holding right now for someone you couldn't reach, for words left unspoken, for a moment that passed too quickly, it's allowed to rest exactly where it is. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for listening.